Biden and his people, and his probably autopen. It looked like we had an autopen for a president, and we would have been better off if we had, probably. The whole subject of autopen, did he know what he was doing? Did he authorize it? Or is this somebody in an office, maybe a radical left lunatic, just signing whatever that person wants? To sign pardons and all of the things that he signed with an autopen is disgraceful.
President Trump speaking to reporters on Air Force One about the Biden administration's use of autopen. As you heard there, the president appeared to question whether or not President Biden really knew what he was signing in those last few hours of his presidency. And he claims, at least on a Truth Social post, that those pardons are void and vacant because of the use of autopen.
Either that or he's a master of signature to match them just like that each and every time. But Trump saying the use of Biden's autopen is the reason why, and says Biden, quote, did not sign the pardons and, quote, did not know anything about them. Let's bring in Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey to join us now. AG, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. So as you remember, President Biden pardoned his family members as well as those preemptive pardons, by the way, for Dr. Anthony Fauci, General Mark Milley, members and staff of the J6 Select Committee. And you yourself have been demanding a DOJ investigation into whether President Biden's cognitive decline allowed unelected staff to push through radical policy without knowing or having the president's approval. Can you talk to us about this?
Well, I agree with the president of the United States that under the Biden administration, there was a fraud of constitutional proportion perpetrated by Biden's staffers who were abusing his lack of mental acuity, his cognitive decline, to usurp constitutional authority and execute documents in his name and without his authority. You got to remember, under Article 2 of the United States Constitution, all executive authority and certain specific enumerated powers are vested in a singular President of the United States of America. So the use of the autopen is questionable, but it goes beyond that. To President Trump's point, who was making the decisions? Because it's clear from the quantum of evidence that President Biden lacked the mental acuity to form an intentional mental state. Look at his own Department of Justice in February of 2024, declining to file charges against him, stating that he was a helpless old man who couldn't form that intentional mental state. Well, if he can't do that, then the documents signed on his behalf lack legal validity. I completely agree with President Trump, and it's important that the American people understand that these documents lack that legal validity.
Yeah. Interesting conversation, right? Because we haven't sort of got to this place before in an attempt to overturn a presidential pardon. As we know, this is exclusively for the president of the United States. We believe that you can't do that, and a president has a right to issue pardons to whomever they might like to, and you don't have to sign it physically. You could even, according to Judge Napolitano, you could just say someone is pardoned, and they are. Do you hold that understanding as well?
Well, yeah, but I would point out here, it's not that anyone's trying to overturn a pardon. It's that no pardons were actually issued. These are fraudulent documents because if President Biden didn't understand what he was doing and the full consequences thereof and authorize it to happen, then they never existed in the first place. They lack legal validity. Look, these types of disputes happen all the time in probate courts across the United States of America, where someone will execute a testamentary instrument like signing a will that changes the disbursements of assets or their estate, and others will come in and contest whether or not they were of sound mind to sign that will and to change that document. And so that happens hundreds of times across the United States of America in courtrooms, in probate courts across this country. The difference is here, we're not talking about the disbursement of assets and an estate after someone's demise. We're talking about constitutional authority with real significant implications, where you've got offenders on death row facing the ultimate punishment who will now escape that punishment if these so-called pardons are given validity. You've got violent offenders who were pardoned, executive actions that were taken. And again, the quantum of evidence would suggest that President Biden didn't know what he was doing. Speaker Johnson had a personal interaction with the president where he questioned why Biden had signed an executive order attacking American energy. President Biden said, according to Speaker Johnson, well, what are you talking about? I never did that. So who's executing the documents? Who's controlling that autopen and using this authority that singularly belongs to only the President of the United States? That's why this is a fraud of constitutional proportion.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.